It's officially 6 o'clock if you want to go ahead and get started.
Okay, welcome to the Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, or PBIS, Strategies for Supporting Your Child's Learning at Home. It's a follow-on to the webinar series, and it's a panel discussion that we'll be having tonight in a question and answer format. The webinars were hosted by Stephanie Dyer, Stacy Rulison, and tonight Kanika Littleton will be facilitating and moderating the panel. So I'll turn it over to you, Kanika.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for tonight's panel. As Stacy said, I am Kanika Littleton. I am the Director of Michigan Alliance for Families, and I want to take a second to acknowledge some of the people who have devoted their knowledge, expertise, and time to making this panel possible tonight. So, including Michigan's Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports, Technical Assistance Center, Michigan Alliance for Families, and Michigan Alliance for Families Parent Mentors, Michigan parents from across the state, Kent Intermediate School District, or ISD, Dickerson Iron ISD, Marquette Alger Regional Education Service Agency, and Oakland Schools. So I am going to go over our roles for tonight's panel. If you want to switch the slides, Stacy. Thank you. So I will be acting as our moderator for tonight. Our facilitators tonight will be Stephanie Dyer from Michigan's Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports Technical Assistance Center and Stacy Rulison from Michigan Alliance for Families. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and they will each take a moment to say hello after I call their name. We're going to start with Lisa Anderson from Dickerson Iron ISD. Lisa, if you want to say hello.
I'm the special education supervisor at Dickinson Iron. I'm also our area autism specialist.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also have Patty Banks, who is our Michigan Alliance for Families Regional Parent Mentor servicing families in Oakland County.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patty.
We have Sally Beauchamp, who is a Michigan Alliance for Parent Mentor, Michigan Alliance for Families Parent Mentor for all of the UP, including Marquette Alger.
Hi, everyone. Glad to talk to you tonight.
We have Chelsea Kittredge from Kent ISD.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting us join you.
And Nicole Lackey from Marisa.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me today.
Hi, Nicole. We have Stephanie Nichols, our other Michigan Alliance for Families Parent Mentor servicing Oakland County.
Evening. Thanks for joining us.
We have Mary Perfett Nelson from Oakland Schools.
Hi, everybody.
And Angela Tiska, from a parent advisory committee member in for Oakland Schools as well.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight.
And last but not least, we have Deb Whitford, who is our regional parent mentor for Kent County.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us.
Thank you, everyone. I am going to pass it back over to Stacy so she can explain our intended purpose for tonight's panel.
Thanks, Kanika. So tonight we're going to be addressing questions that have been posed by families to Michigan Alliance for Families related to their child's education or behavior at home or school. We're going to gain parent mentor, and intermediate school district or educational service agency professional perspectives on using PBIS strategies at home and school to address educational and behavioral questions, and also provide PBIS resources to assist parents and educators implementing evidence-based learning and behavioral strategies at home and school.
All right, thank you, Stacy. So I believe we have a poll coming up.
Yep.
And you should see it on your screen. The question is, which of the three Michigan Alliance for Families, Michigan Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports, PBIS webinars have you watched? Please mark all that apply. We'll take a minute to get those results. Okay, so it seems the majority of you have not seen the webinar series. So that webinar series is available on the Michigan Alliance for Families website under our archived webinars. And I believe we will send that link out to you for the webinars at the end of this discussion.
Okay, so a little more than half of you had not seen the webinars, so I'm going to sum them up in a really just a couple of minutes and hopefully entice you to go ahead and go take a look at those. So the 3 webinars were really focused on how to use positive behavioral interventions and supports, or PBIS, how to apply those in your home to support your child. And so PBIS can really be boiled down to 3 key words, and that is we want to prevent challenging behaviors from happening by setting kids up for success, by doing things like establishing routines in our homes so that everyone has expectations, they understand what's coming next, and that will help reduce anxiety and prevent behavior. So prevention is a huge part of PBIS, and the first webinar really talked about that. Then the second part of PBIS is a focus on teaching. So what we all know, everyone on this call knows, is you can't just say stop it and behavior stops. Otherwise we wouldn't have webinars, we wouldn't need panels. And so what we know that we need to do is we need to teach skills. So some students need and children need to learn to do certain skills in order to be successful, and that alone prevents behavior. Sometimes we have children that have behaviors like, if I want attention, I might yell, or I might hit. And so what we want to do is teach new skills to replace that. So I have a better way of getting your attention without needing to do those types of behaviors to get it. And so that's part of PBIS, is that teaching. And through that, we want to recognize when kids do that, like, hey, you learned this new skill, yay, you're on the right track. Like you raised your hand and then you stopped, like, yay. So we want to recognize it, and we want to remind them, remember, if you need my attention, you're going to do whatever we're teaching. So those things alone, prevention and teaching, help reduce many challenging behaviors right from the get-go by having good expectations and teaching new skills. Then lastly, we need to have ways to respond to behavior. We need to respond to behavior in a couple ways. One is when we see behavior that we want to see again, like if I've taught a new way to get my attention, if my child shows me that, I want to respond like, yay, that is what I want. That's great. That's how we do this, so that we see it again. And that's, we need kind of a plan for that. We want to make sure we're responding in that way. And then we also need a way to respond to behavior that doesn't help us or doesn't cause us to inadvertently reinforce it. Like if my child hits me because he wants my attention, giving my attention is going to reinforce that behavior. So we want to respond in ways that that's not going to happen. And so what we did in webinar 3 with that is we talked about how do you do things like redirect, reteach? How do you do things like provide choice to help respond to behavior? And then we also talked a little bit about how to establish some scripts for yourself so that you can respond to challenging behavior in a way that keeps you as non-emotional as can be. We're humans, and that doesn't further escalate what's going on. So then in a nutshell, that's what the 3 webinars were about, with some tangible kind of takeaways, to-dos, I guess, that you could do to support your children.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Let's review how the question and answer sessions will work for tonight. So we received a set of 12 questions, or actually received more than that. These questions came in from parents across the state. They came into Michigan Alliance for Families. We narrowed them down to 12 questions that we thought would be very beneficial for you. So each panelist will answer at least 1 to 2 questions. Following the panel responses, we will open it up for discussion to all of you who are joining us tonight. So please utilize the question and answer box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can submit your questions at any time. We will be taking a look at those and generalizing those questions, meaning that we will pair up questions which are similar, and we will answer those tonight for you. We'll be giving general information. So if you have a specific question about your child or your child's specific school, I'm going to ask that you please send those questions to Michigan Alliance for Families at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org, and that contact information will be shared again at the end of our session. Finally, if time does not allow for us to answer all of the questions, we will be sending those responses out via email. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question. And that goes to Stephanie Nichols from Michigan Alliance for Families. Stephanie, just a reminder that please keep your response to 3 minutes or less. The question is, how does implementation of PBIS components, such as establishing routines and teaching expectations, help to reduce student anxiety?
I could keep this answer at like 10 seconds, and that is, if I know what's going to happen, my anxiety is reduced. That across the board for all humans, I think that part of that anxiety is that mystery of what's going to happen next. And routines and teaching expectations tell me what the sequence is, if it's first and then, if it's my whole day laid out. I know what's happening. I know what the steps are. I know what to expect. And the teaching expectations give me ground rules so that I can be on the same page. I am suddenly the student in my talking here, but I can do what you want. If I don't know what you want, I can't meet that goal. I can't meet that target. That the routine will give me more independence because I will learn the steps. And teachers are fantastic at doing this in the classroom. And I can tell you as a parent, I'm not great at it. Like, it's hard. This is not natural to me. It's something that I have to think about and I have to put in place and I have to repeat for myself as well. And part of where that comes in my house is that the visual piece is huge. That if it is where we can see it, if we have the steps to brushing our teeth in the bathroom and I can point at them instead of giving any direction, my child can independently do that skill. So the routine teaches the steps and gives the power and gives the independence and also the expectation. And the teaching expectation, again, gives me those ground rules that I can work from. Change is really hard though, especially when you've built this framework for your student, for your child. So in this climate where everything is changing day to day, still try to have the visuals, still try to have those supports to reduce the anxiety, but talk about it. When you hear that what was hybrid is now virtual or something else has changed, talk with your student, explain it, and set those expectations that are different, that are changing, how those routines are changing so that they know what's coming.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And our next question. This will be for Lisa Anderson. My child has a link, also called peer-to-peer support, while in school, and now there are no peers to model behavior. What can I do? And I'm assuming this is a question about learning at a distance. Lisa, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Maybe unmuting would help. Sorry. So for this question, I did take it as, what we would do for kids in a distance learning situation or virtually. And as a member of one of the START regional collaborative networks, which is UPenn in the Upper Peninsula where I am, we've discussed this at length with strategies because peer-to-peer supports are really important for our students in school. They provide cues for kids. They They give them social opportunities. So the first thing that we've done with this is determining which adult is coordinating that peer-to-peer situation for your students. So that might be a general education teacher, but often it's more a special education teacher, a speech and language pathologist, a social worker, or some other staff member that's providing other services for your student. So as part of your students' contingency learning plan, which is what they're doing outside of school related to their IEP, a parent could ask that service provider to facilitate some online meetings where the student has access to their links group. They could also help determine like what kinds of services are they benefiting from with their link, or what kinds of supports. So finding out what's happening in school that's making this so successful and moving that towards home. So if that's, you know, the social aspect, maybe asking the social worker to facilitate some groups, Zoom meetings or Google Meets with their links group. Or if it's in the classroom, maybe talking to their general education teacher about how they can support them during a classroom meeting or a small group meeting. And then some other things that we've done are just fun parties. So like just a links group meeting where students can have a dance party or lunch and share or something like that. So, you know, that type of activity lets them learn at their own level, having lots of choices. They can just simply interact, they can just imitate what other kids are doing, or they can, you know, lead the participation. But allowing for all those different choices is important, just because that reduces anxiety, that gives them, you know, reinforcement that they're doing, you know, they're leading something. And then, because my time's almost up, START has developed link activity boxes, which gives students activities that they can do during those link meetings. And I'm going to share the link for that on the online link. And you can look at that and get great ideas. START has a lot of focus on peer-to-peer and links. So go ahead and look at that.
Thank you
Hey,
so much,
Lisa.
Lisa.
Yeah.
And sorry, Tanika, I just wanted to make sure that I'm not sure everybody that's listening knows what START is, but the
You want me to-
acronym. Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Yep, it's a statewide training, autism resource training network. So START is with Grand Valley State University, and they provide a lot of training resources throughout the state in order to provide evidence-based practices for students with autism. But links, I mean, it initiated with autism, but we also provide links now for all students with disabilities. So that's an important thing to remember. I mean, we all associate it with kids with autism because that's where it really originated. But links are important people for any student with a disability, you know, that's determined that they need that kind of social support. So, but there is a lot of information on START's website through Grand Valley State.
Thank you, Lisa, for elaborating on that, and we will certainly share out that resource. So our next question, we are going to pose this question to three of you. We're going to start with Sally Beauchamp. It is, what is the best way for families to align their home routines for online learning with the school or teachers' routines and expectations? And if you could take about 2 minutes each to answer that.
Okay. One thing is you have to know the teacher's routine. So it's very important that you communicate with the teacher and get that routine so you know what they're doing. I would also suggest that you make up, if you were watching some of these webinars, they suggested making up your own family expectations with your own values so that you can kind of intertwine what the teacher wants and what you as a family want for your child in their education, which is a great idea. So I would set up a space, maybe give your child a choice. Does he want to sit at a desk? Does he want to sit in a beanbag chair? But I would limit it to 2 choices so they're comfortable and that it's a quiet time and everybody in the house knows it's going to be a quiet time because everybody's doing their online learning. I would have post your rules and expectations so that the children know what's going on, what you expect. Like you could say, you know, after class, you have to turn off your computer. And the list should be what they should do and not what they shouldn't do, because then you're actually teaching them the task. You know, you're teaching them a task. You're not just telling them, don't do that. You're telling them, no, you need to put your crayons in the box or whatever. And then they know that's what they have to complete. Again, like Stephanie was saying with the routines, it lessens the frustration of not knowing what the expectations are or what they should do. And that's the whole point, I think, of the behavior intervention things, supports, is so that you alleviate that anxiety and frustration and the kid knows exactly what they have to do.
Thank you so much, Sally. How about you, Deb? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things that I could add to that. You know, kids have a less developed ability to control their impulses than adults. So I want to talk a little bit about distractions and have a conversation with your child about what they might be distracted by and begin to build an online learning or homework routine that can be really beneficial. And as Sally suggested, talk to your child's teacher about what the setting in their classroom would be like, and then allow your child to choose a location in the home where learning will be done and set that center up. Another thing I could talk a little bit about is multitasking, because when we're on a home situation and the online learning, there's a lot of things going on. And there are disabilities that can really add to kind of the confusion of that. There are executive function skills that are integral to doing homework that are weakened further when our kids are dividing their attention across multiple platforms. So skills such as self-regulating skills that we use to do things like shift between situations, controlling our emotions and impulsivity, and then organize and make plans. With that being said, as parents, we can be observant of our children to decide which behaviors might cause problems at homework time. So such as putting homework off to the last minute, forgetting materials or neglecting to write down assignments, rushing through their work and making careless mistakes, you know, dawdling over assignments, taking hours to complete what should only take a few minutes. So document these things and be really specific as you can when talking to your child's teacher and describing those behaviors, so that when they happen, so that you and your teacher can then begin to work to devise strategies on how to motivate your child through those behaviors. And just a couple of tips in creating these routines is, you know, get some homework planners going, help your child fill out a planner and stay on task. If you have older students, maybe you want to create a homework contract. That always works with teens, right? Create that together. And then set goals and create incentive systems. And then build in breaks if you need to, you know, such as sensory needs and snacks. I hope that's helpful.
Excellent, excellent information. Okay, Angela.
Well, those ladies did a very good job of summing it up. I have just a few other things. I have 2 elementary age children that are doing the remote learning from home. And I would also mention, we talked about the routines and having visual schedules and things, but I would make sure that those visual schedules are in a place where they're appropriate. So for example, right now I'm in my students' Zoom room, and you know, here I've got the classroom schedule right next to me where we can see it. We've got our homework folder, we have our, you know, our assignments for the day. Everything is right here in close proximity, so that, you know, we don't forget those things. Also, I would mention that you mentioned talking to the teachers and finding out what the rules and expectations are in the classroom, but I would make sure that you have the same or similar rules at home. Like I tell my children, this is school right now. So if the teacher has a no drinks policy, then we don't have drinks in our classroom. Or Like our teacher says that we don't wear hats or hoodies. So when my student is sitting in Zoom, we don't wear hats or hoodies. So, we try to make sure that our expectations at home align with the same rules and expectations that they would have in the classroom. Also, I would add that you want to make sure that you explain the rules to them. Don't assume that they know what the rules mean. And you have to review them often too. I have to tell my children almost every day, being respectful means raising your hand and waiting to be called on, or, whatever the rule might be. So, and we go over those every single day almost. And the other thing would be to give positive reinforcement. So today, my son did a really good job of sitting and raising his hand and having the teacher call on him. So I made sure to praise him for that and tell them that he did a really good job doing that. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful advice. Very good points about setting clear expectations and making sure that you align the school and home environments as closely as possible. So let's go on, Angela. We're back to you again. The next question is, as a parent, what can I do for children that cannot or will not attend to screen for remote content and become anxious, cry, meltdown, or simply refuse and run away?
Well, I'll be honest, and this is probably our biggest hurdle with the remote and online learning. Both of my children really struggle with this here. So I felt kind of fortunate that I got to watch all the webinars and learn some of the strategies. And I found out that we were actually doing a lot of them. So one of the things I do, first of all, is somebody else mentioned it, but I think Stephanie mentioned it. So you explain what the environment's going to look like. We tell social stories and we talk about what remote learning is going to look like, and what what the expectations are for that remote learning. I set the stage ahead of time. So my oldest son is cognitively impaired and has a lot of disabilities, and he has a really, really hard time with the Zoom. And we're doing occupational therapy via Zoom right now, which is very challenging. But one of the things I found that was very helpful to him is that if I turned on the Zoom and then I brought him into the room, he got very anxious and very upset and that type of thing. So I found that if I would bring him to the table before the Zoom started, we'd go maybe 10 minutes ahead of time and we'd read a book or do a preferred activity beforehand, that he was more comfortable with his environment and he was more apt to listen and pay attention and be engaged in his lesson. So that's one thing, develop comfort and that type of thing. And then know the signs that your child is struggling. So if you see that your child is starting to become anxious and you think they're on the brink of a meltdown, then you can start doing some of the strategies that were talked about in the webinar, like redirecting back to the task, increasing reinforcement. I'll often tell him, we'll cut down on the task. So if he's doing, he's trying to identify his letters, we'll say, okay, just 5 more, or just 1 more, or that type of thing. So, we diffuse some of that by we don't give in to him and say, okay, we're going to quit now because you're having a meltdown. But we say, okay, we can just do 1 more. Let's just get through 1 more and then we can take a break. And then I think it's really important when you do take breaks with children that you don't give them any demands. So when you do the breaks, you don't work on the homework or go ahead in the work. You let them take a brain break. And you also shouldn't give them preferred activities. Like my son is a big iPad kid. And I make sure that if he's melting down in his Zoom, that I don't give him a break and then hand him the iPad, because then you're reinforcing that negative behavior. So you can take a break and you can, remove yourself from the situation, but we're not going to go get on the iPad just because you're not having a good time with Zoom. So those are some of the things that I would offer for suggestions.
Wonderful. Patty, what are your thoughts?
Those were all excellent, Angela. I would also, what I would do is start with what works in different situations, what works in school, and try to align that at home and see if you can make that work. Otherwise, then you could use the tools that we're talking about here, as in scripting, setting routines and schedules, checklists. My son does really well with checklists. First do this, and then you can do this, which is, like a reward system, setting up a reward system. Visual supports or visual cues. Like Angela said, right at the desk, right where they can access it. My son keeps it as a bookmark in his book in every binder that he has, so that it's not conspicuous for him to look at and socially acceptable and all that. And that really works for him to have a checklist in every class. Also check into sensory needs, and if your child has sensory needs that need to be met, if they're met at school, how does that work at school? How does it work in other areas of your home and your life? Is there something that you can do for sensory needs at home, sitting on a wiggle ball or a wiggle chair, or having some fidgets around, that kind of thing? And then also consider whether your child is struggling somehow academically with the technology, or accessing communications, not feeling connected to the teacher, maybe having a question, maybe the material is too difficult, but kind of looking into all of that. If they're refusing school, behavior is communication, so that's really important to really kind of look into everything and see what you can find out on your, and try to align it with school.
Thank you, Patty. I do want to remind everyone to, if you have questions, please type them into your Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will be having a live Q&A session at the end. Next question for Nicole Lackey. Will there be PBIS training assistance for parents who have kids with challenging behaviors to help what works in the classroom carry over at home?
Yes, I think it's a very good question. And I do think that, at the schools, there are key people that can assist parents who are managing virtual school at home. I think first, it's really great to check in with your teacher and find out what kind of behavioral supports she or he has been using in their class in person, and talk to them about how to adapt that into your home environment. For example, some teachers might use a clip system to, provide reinforcement for children when they're behaving well. They clip up, and when they're misbehaving, they might clip down. And that's a way for kids to really visually see, how they're doing with expectations. So checking with teacher is a really good strategy. For a kid that has a special ed eligibility, checking in with the IEP team, the individualized education planning team, because there's multiple people on that team that might be able to provide direct assistance, to you as a parent to manage behavior. People like school social workers like myself, behavior consultants. I think special ed teachers often have a big toolbox for managing behaviors that they can also help you with. For those students who are general education students, I think there's also still some people that can help. I know 31N social workers that we have in our district, and I think that are across the state, are specifically social workers that help general education students and can provide assistance via phone or virtual to help parents directly. And I think just in the bigger picture, like the PBIS training, I think that a lot of ISDs, and I can really only speak for mine, but I think that a lot of ISDs and our ISD is really starting to think hard about how to help families that are doing virtual learning with their students. And we're working on developing resources and trainings. And I think it would be great for ISDs to partner with Michigan Alliance for Families to share those type of trainings and resources as they're developed.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
Mhm.
Next question. We're going to start off with Chelsea. My child works with different people all day who respond differently, are not communicating with each other. How can they coordinate with having the same expectations and responses to behavior?
So the first thing that comes to my mind in reading this question is the positive behavior support plan. So this might be for students who have individualized behavioral needs or social emotional needs. But really the purpose of the positive behavior support plan is to set up a very consistent system whereby anyone who works with the student is responding to problem behavior the same way and making sure that we're reinforcing the behaviors that we're trying to teach or those appropriate behaviors we'd like to see in the same way. And along with that plan, there's some sort of data collection happening to ensure that the interventions that we've identified are doing their job and are working, or to let us know that it's time to revise the plan and try something new. So often in our own practice, in my practice, and in some of the staff that I work with, those data collection sheets are also a great communication tool that can follow the student wherever they go throughout the day, and gives an opportunity for each staff member to give some feedback about what they're seeing in their classroom and whether the student was able to meet those expectations. And then a copy of that can be sent home to the family. And that can be a conversation that you have with your IEP team about how you'd like to receive that information or how often you'd like to receive that information. I think having something, tangible, whether it be in email form or a paper form, is helpful for staff too, to kind of keep it at the forefront of their mind, to make sure that we're communicating with families. Another piece to maybe consider would be some sort of monitoring service or consultative type service in the IEP. So that could be listed perhaps in like a supplementary aid or service, to maybe have some regular meetings with the team throughout the year to make sure whomever is your case manager or whomever's overseeing that behavior plan can meet with everyone throughout the year and just remind them what those goals are for the student.
Thank you. Patty Banks.
Hi, I agree with Chelsea. She had some great tips on that, especially with the progress monitoring. That's something that you can set up in your IEP and discuss with the team and kind of just figure out how your team communicates best. You can ask them, figure out how you communicate best, whether it's text, email, on the phone, when you're dropping off or picking up back and when you could do that. And just see how you can communicate and put that into the IEP as far as how often your progress will be reported. You can set up informal meetings also, whether that's via text or email or via phone call. Now we can have a Zoom meeting pretty easily. That's kind of good to do with a whole team or just parts of a team. It's good to define who is going to talk to the whole team and all of the teachers to let them know when there's changes that have been made to the IEP. Well, to go over the IEP first and then let them know if there's been any changes in changes in the behavior plan or any of the strategies being used. I would also say something that's really handy is a communications log or communication list, a checklist. Communication log can go between the child and every person that, teacher, therapist that they come in contact with during the day can write a note in there. You can also create a checklist on certain behaviors that you're really trying to pinpoint so that the teachers can just check it off really quickly and there's not a lot of work to it. And those are, the progress reporting though is definitely something that you want to make sure you define so that you know when you have expectations on when you're going to meet to discuss what's working, what's not.
Absolutely. Okay, our next question. My child yells and hits when frustrated. I am not seeing any pattern for when frustration and the behavior happens in learning. What can I do? And we will start with Mary Perfect Nelson.
Okay, this is tricky because I think that there is a pattern. I think being a parent is being a good environmental engineer and trying very hard to think and feel like your child does. And there's a pattern there. And I think we have to acknowledge that right now we are in a global pandemic. There is trauma everywhere. And so the stressors are coming at us left and right. And so there's that that we're all experiencing. And so when your body is dealing with these stressors, in fact, it's very predictable that we're going to respond. So the stress sits in your body and it's almost like, there's a threat coming. Well, the first thing that you want to do is run. The second thing, if that doesn't work, is that you're going to have to fight. And essentially, when you see kids acting out, wanting to become frustrated, and maybe they're yelling and hitting, that is actually them letting you know that there's something askew, and we have to figure out, what it is. I think we also have to think about the fact that the first thing that happens when we have this, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats, is this idea that gosh, I lost my train of thought, is that we have to help them get through it. So if they're feeling some kind of, emotion, that is automatic. That is not a plan. They're not planning that. It's happening. And we have to help them get through that emotional tunnel. And so some of the acting out that you're seeing is one of the ways that they do that. So for me, it's a prevention, trying to figure it out. When safety and belonging have been disrupted by the pandemic, the routines are different. They might change all of the time. That in and of itself is what you might be seeing, but we have to restore safety. The brain has to feel safe, and the heart has to feel like they belong. They want to belong to either that classroom, the teacher, et cetera, et cetera. And so whatever we can do to model calm will help them bring it down a couple of notches. See if you can talk with the teacher to find out if they're noticing any patterns as to when and why it happens, because prevention will be key. And I think some of the other things that other people have talked about, staying calm, letting them know what to expect, all of those routines can be helpful at alleviating, the experience that they're having.
Absolutely. Sally Beauchamp?
I agree with a lot of what Mary said, but I also think this is because of all this different change. I am so glad my son is not in school right now. He's 23, and I can't even imagine what it would be like if one day he's going to school and the next day he's got to stay home. I mean, he has autism, and I tried my best to keep things scheduled because I didn't want meltdowns, but it happened so quickly, just like up here in Dickinson County. The schools were going last week. This week, they're not. So I really feel for parents today with this pandemic, because it is very hard to have a schedule. But I also think it's really important then, as in those webinars, we're talking about establishing routines. I mean, it's like even more important that you do that as a family now, because if you have some kind of household routines in the home and you are always reminding your student of that, I think that their stress level will go down immensely, because at least they have something to, like Mary said, it's always changing. So that adds to their frustration and anxiety. So at least if they have those routines that are being established in the home, they won't be as fearful when it keeps switching back and forth. So I think that's really important right now, especially. Also, to learn the techniques about how to calm a child when he's having a meltdown. And like Mary said, parents know their child better than anybody. And there is something going on. That behavior is there for a reason. It's just not, random. There's something that's going on, and it's up to, I guess, the teacher that's on the other side of the computer and the parent that's there with their child or the babysitter, whoever it is, to try to figure it out. Like, why is my son or daughter, you know, when we go on, there's got to be something, you know, and so observing, you know, when it happens, maybe the time of day, all those things should be taken into consideration so you can figure it out, because there is a reason for it. It's just, it isn't random. Might look like it is, but it isn't. So,
Right. Thank you,
you know,
Sally.
that's what I would, thank you.
Remembering behavior is communication. Our next question is for Stephanie Nichols. What can I do for my child who refuses to wear a mask or keep a mask on? It is a big struggle.
Oh, it is a big struggle, and it isn't going away. That we're all looking at this data and we're all living in this environment, and it is gonna look like this for a while. I think the first thing would be communicate with your school, and that not being able to wear tolerated masks shouldn't be shouldn't be preventing their access to vape, that they should be getting a free and appropriate public education still. But beyond that, I think this question is asking, and it's hard. I would say start small. That if you say, oh, you're going to wear a mask for 8 hours, I couldn't wear a mask for 8 hours 5 months ago, but I can now because I started wearing a mask for 5 minutes, or a trip to the grocery store, or a trip to the zoo, and it built up over time. And I think one of the weird things about a mask in this environment that we're in right now is that there's some natural consequences and natural supports for having the behavior. So we've talked about praising behavior and high fives and awesome job and all of that great stuff, which is fantastic. There are places that most kids want to go to that you cannot go to if you are not wearing a mask. So I think that natural support is there to build up, and I think you have to start small. The other thing we found in my house, which made a big difference for us, is all masks are not the same. I own a pair of very uncomfortable jeans, and if I only tried on that one pair of jeans, I would never wear jeans again. And it is an article of clothing that you are wearing. So if it is not comfortable, try a different mask. I feel like that was really challenging when we started with masks. And at this point, we can borrow them from other people and wash them and clean them and make sure they're properly sanitized, but to try and see if the structure works for the person. We actually started with a gaiter or a bandana where it was kind of looser and didn't hang on anything, and then built up. And we have landed with one that ties and goes over the ears, so we have independence to take it on and off. But it was a trial and error of, it is an article of clothing that all of them are not going to be comfortable. That does not mean that there's no possibility of wearing a mask. So I would say start small, try different styles, and those natural supports, those natural rewards, use them to your advantage.
Excellent suggestions. Okay, and our next question, please. Is it okay to use screen time to reinforce, reward my child? And we are going to start with Chelsea from Kent ISD.
I would say absolutely. If that's reinforcing to your child, is the caveat. I appreciate this question because I have this conversation a lot with parents, you know, even in our own household, with wanting to limit screen time, especially now that many of our students are on the screen a lot longer for their school day than they were this time last year. So here would be maybe a suggestion if you're having a little bit of that guilt about how much time your child's spending on a screen, is continue to explore additional things that might be serve as reinforcers for your child, right? But if what is really reinforcing is screen time, then we want to make sure that we're still providing, you know, those rewards when students are working really hard and meeting goals and making progress. Continuing to explore additional things might open up avenues where perhaps screen time is still the most rewarding thing you can offer, but perhaps you can find other little things that can kind of get you through the day so that you aren't always relying on screen time. But if you have a student, and a lot of the students I work with have, you know, very limited interests and are very reinforced by only a few things. And if screens are one of them, one of the few things, I think it's absolutely okay to use that to reinforce. If you're worried about the amount of time and you have a child who is able to, you know, delay that screen time a bit, perhaps looking at increasing just incrementally, don't go too big too fast, but increasing maybe what they need to earn in order to get that screen time. So instead of it just being, you know, first we're going to do this and then you can have your screen, maybe you have a child where you can set up, you know, maybe earning 3 or 4 little icons that indicate screen time at the end, or you might have a child who, you know, you can equate minutes. So for minutes that you spend doing this, you can have that many minutes of screen time. But I would say absolutely you have to use what's going to be most reinforcing. If we want positive behavior to continue, we have to make sure that we're providing things that our kids want to show them that good job. And so if screens are the way in your household, then I would say absolutely providing that for reinforcement. The other piece, which came up earlier, is just making sure that if you're using it as a reinforcer, trying to limit it to only offering it once you've seen what you want to see from that child. So trying not to use it unless you're in some sort of, you know, emergency situation where you've got to just shut problem behavior down quickly, but trying to really hold on to that screen time and only offering it, you know, when your child's met an expectation will help kind of set that standard, and you'll see more of that positive behavior.
Thank you. Nicole Lackey, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to say that Chelsea was pretty thorough there. I would very much agree with everything that she said. And I do agree that there's a lot of parents that feel guilty about the amount of screen time that their children are having. But I think that parents really need to go easy on themselves right now. We are, you know, as we all know, in a global pandemic, and there's only, you know, a limited amount of things that we can offer right now. And again, if screen time is what's most reinforcing for your child, then it is going to be very useful for you to have them earn that as a reinforcer. It's going to get you the desired work done that you would like to have done, or help you meet your goals with your students. So yeah, great job, Chelsea.
Thank you so much. Next question. And this is for Lisa Anderson. What are some ideas for helping my child stay engaged during online learning without someone sitting right next to him all day? How do we reduce Zoom fatigue?
So a lot of the ideas that other people have given are exactly what I kind of wrote down in my notes when I was thinking about how do you transition a child to an online environment while keeping them engaged without, you know, having to be their partner in that, you know, being able to do that independently. And I mean, the things that I thought of are what's worked for the student in the school environment. Did they have visuals? Did they have a timer? Were there other organizational supports? Did they have a schedule or a planner? And our first delivery that we sent home with our students consisted of a lot of these items or duplicate copies of those items. So whatever they were using successfully in school, we sent home with them. And then talk to the parents about how to use that and why it was successful for us. And for older students, it might have been like an organizational system that worked for them, you know, like we talked about the folders, you know, this is the work that you have to do today, or other types of organizational supports. But it might also be a task analysis, and how do you do a task analysis of an activity that you want your child to do, and maybe you're supporting them through part of it, but then part of it is independent. So teachers that you have contact with definitely know how to explain some of those things, and And hopefully you've had good conversations with your teachers before this happens, so that you know some of the supports that your student is using. Another thing that we did is we've been on again, off again, like Sally said. So we have had opportunities since March to have our kids in person, and we've done a lot of practice, like practice logging into the Google Classroom, practice how you make comments on a question, practice how you do a survey online, practice and doing that in person, and then practicing maybe individually. So if you haven't had that time, I know downstate, some of you haven't been in person, and that makes it more difficult, but you can also have, individualized sessions with a teacher or someone that can practice using those different platforms and in those activities. So I think that that's important, the practice and the practice learning. It's a really different format, but that increases independence too, because then they know how to do those things on their own. So providing those familiar supports, teaching them skills, and then accessing, familiar activities or things that they love to do. Like when we have a classroom that has a dance party and they each get to pick a song, and, being able to do some of those things that are super simple, but they, enjoyed in the classroom and they know those routines. Those things always help. And then as far as Zoom fatigue, one of the things that we found is, you have synchronous learning where you're, live on with a Zoom meeting, or asynchronous where you're just going on maybe a Facebook page or a Google Classroom and looking at activities. When you have those activities to look at where students can kind of learn at their own pace or maybe view them multiple times, that's really helpful for students to reduce stress and being able to front load them before they get on a Zoom meeting, so that they're not learning it all right in that live session. So I think those are some of the things that, we've been doing and parents have found to be somewhat helpful in that situation.
Well, those are all excellent suggestions. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
And our question for Mary is, I am not sure what motivates my child. He doesn't seem interested in anything. How do I keep him interested in what he enjoys? He seems to get bored with it.
Okay, tricky stuff, especially right now. I did talk about the stress response that we have. There are situations where people get overwhelmed. They might be overwhelmed so that they don't have the resources available for such things as being interested and engaged in things that they normally will. So that could be happening, in which case I would say the most important intervention that you can do is get the child to move with them. Moving the body is a way to discharge the stressors that they might be holding inside. That said, I think when I saw this, engagement and motivation, there are some universal truths about that. And maybe there's a couple of cues for you in this model that I love. It's called the Circle of Courage. And it goes way back to, I think, the Lakota tribe used it. And it's a model that really looks at how is it that human beings are motivated? What is it that makes us feel alive and engaged in our world? And there are 4 big ideas. And so the first one is about belonging. And so we are all motivated to belong, to be part of a tribe, to feel like who we are and what we are is accepted by the people around us. It doesn't have to be a large number of people, but having a place where we belong and places where we belong is one way that keeps people motivated. The second is about mastery. This is about feeling like you can get better at something, having any kind of competence in different areas. In my head, with my children, and I raised 4 children through adulthood. There's parenting 4 adults. Making sure that you find what they're good at and helping them to get better at that is something that I think is one of the most important tasks that a parent has. Third, independence. We want to make sure that they have some ways to make decisions for themselves, no matter how old they are. Give them opportunities, find ways for them to become independent and to be able to make decisions, even for their own failure or success. And the last one, and this is a really new one for me, is generosity. And that's the idea that you want to feel like you have something worth giving to other people. So, and you'll see that. You'll see people all the time trying to give, wanting to contribute, wanting to be a part of a community. And the older that I get, the more that I see this. I see this with especially adults who have, gone through all the stages and they're toward the end, and that's what they want to do. They want to give back to the community. And I think this is true for all children. So finding ways for them to think about somebody outside of themselves can be really helpful in terms of their level of engagement. Think about birthday cards, thank you cards, send that letter to grandma, send a letter to your teacher. Things like that will be really helpful. And other than that, I think just making sure that you have an opportunity to let your children try as many things as possible to find out what's going to stick, what they want, because I think one of the most important tasks of childhood and of education is helping these little people find out who they are, what matters to them, what they're interested in, and let them dive into whatever that is as much as possible. You might be seeing some weird things with engagement right now, but we're all fuzzy brained. We all have, for me and every adult that I know, it's been a roller coaster ride. There's moments where we feel like we can't get out of bed. These kids are going to be no different from you. And I've seen a huge, especially at the beginning of COVID, problem with motivation, staying engaged and getting things done. And so I think it's hard. It's very hard for all of us right now. So when you see the glimmers of engagement, revel in it and let them know, wow, look at you. You are really creating something right now. And just acknowledge what you see as much as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. Okay, and this is our final question before we open it up to live Q&A, and it is for Deb Whitford. I am confused about the technology my child needs to get her homework done. The school is busy managing their workload. I am not sure what I can do. Deb, what are your thoughts?
This is a loaded question. So districts must consider the technology needs of your student. And every ISD has an assistive technology coordinator. So that would be a really good thing for parents to put in their toolbox. Find out who that person is and get that contact information, because that person can be a really nice resource to ask questions about. And it may come down to you needing to ask for an assistive technology evaluation for your child. We have a wonderful webpage on assistive technology. So if you go to the Michigan Alliance for Families.org website, you can go under the topics and take a look at that. That will give you a little more information about how to ask for an evaluation and what that is all about. So that being said, parents, assess the technology that you have in your homes and assess your skills. So if you have internet or you don't have internet, talk with your school about how they can help you get that, especially during this online learning situation. A lot of kids are getting Chromebooks and iPads to use, and some parents have never encountered them, don't know how to use a Chromebook versus a laptop. And so a lot of these devices have built-in technologies to assist our kids, such as read aloud or text to speech for the struggling readers, and then speech to text for our struggling writers. A lot of that is all incorporated into those, and so it'd be really helpful for parents to understand if those devices have it and how to use it. So another thing I would say is get a really good understanding of what learning platforms, programs, and applications your child will be using, such as Google Classroom, Zoom, Hangout Meet, G Suite, Seesaw, Schoology. Those are all programs and apps that kids are going to be using or are using. Most of these have tutorials that parents can watch to get familiar with them. I had mentioned earlier about homework planners. It's a really good techie thing that our kids can use as tools to keep them organized and keep them on task. Angela had mentioned the brain breaks. Some kids can only handle 5 to 25 minutes of screen time. So take that break, exercise, put together some memes or something, just kind of switch gears to give your child that break. another thing I would say also is to keep a good correspondence log of when you're speaking with teachers and ancillary staff, like your speech therapists and social workers. So keep a log of events and conversations, whether that be in a calendar or notes or some voice memos. And then I wanted to also say that most school districts have a media technology department. So ask if they offer any tech support and if they can help show you how to use something on a child's Chromebook. So like I said, we have a lot of good resources out there on our website, and I hope all this was helpful.
Thank you so much, Deb, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your insight and that very valuable information. So we are going to open it up to our live Q&A, and I already see a few questions in the box, so feel free to type in more, and I am going to turn it over to Stephanie Dyer.
All right, thank you to all the panelists for their very thoughtful responses. There are already some questions in the Q&A, but please, if you're listening and have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A box and we'll get it. I'm going to go ahead. I've grouped some of the questions that have come in, and we had a couple additional questions that we received prior as well. So we're going to get to as many as we can. If you all fly in a bunch of questions, we will handle as many as we can. And then, as Stacy said at the beginning, or Kanika, we will be emailing you all with a Q&A document to make sure that all questions that are posed get some response. So I am going to ask the question and then just throw out a suggested panelist to respond, but feel free to pass and have someone else respond. One question is, I like the idea of setting up routines in my home to prevent issues, but I think I need some support. Who might I reach out to? And I was thinking maybe Lisa, Patty, but again, anyone can feel free to respond.
Well, I'll just quickly say, I mean, when we are developing plans for our students that are distance learning, your teachers and the other staff that are working with your student are supposed to be collaborating with you. So I would reach back out to them if you're really feeling like you don't know either how to use the technology or how to do something that they're asking you to do, and ask for some support. We have been putting parent, collaboration with parents or parent support or parent consult in our plans, because we know that that's important. So I would encourage you to reach out to who's ever on your team that you think knows best how to do those things.
I would also add at home, thinking about the big ideas, like having dinner together is really important. Try to have routines around meals. Try to have routines around bedtime, very predictable. And then let there be some downtime as well, where they've got more choice and it's not as pressured. But, at 6 o'clock every day, that's when we have dinner. And your job is to help set the table or whatever. Something like that. Routines around getting up, routines around going to bed, routines around getting at your desk, meaning there's a place, there's things that have to be put out in order for you to be ready, and you need prompts until they can do it, close to by themselves if they can.
Great, thank you, Mary. That is a great idea to start with something at home, something that you predictably do every day. Okay, does anybody else want to weigh in on this, or I'll move on to the next question? Okay, so the next question is, how do I manage teacher routines with 4 students in 3 different schools? Stephanie, for some reason, I thought that you would be a great person to answer this, but if anybody else has a response, please feel free to chime in, and Stephanie, you're free to pass.
I will admit I have 1 child and I think it's overwhelming sometimes. It is hard. There's no way around it. And that many routines, that many schedules. My biggest suggestion, if I were going to try and break it down, would be to color code and then to build as much independent skill as possible. So depending on the ages of your students and how much they can manage independently, but then talking with them about those skills. So it might be that you have a middle schooler and they have a timer that goes off 2 minutes, like your bell system. Like I did not realize as a student that the bell system was really there to support me and not to punish me in some way. Like the warning bell that tells me I have time to get to class. So putting those reminders on the tablet or the phone and trying to utilizing the technology to help each student to help you as much as possible would be my starting point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is anybody else doing it? Patty, go ahead and respond, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd also like to say with that, if you have multiple children in the home and there's maybe an older sibling who might be a model, that would be a good thing too. They can feel proud of it, and everything that they model will be picked up by the other children in the family. I agree with the organization and keeping everything, trying to have the kids be self-efficient and self-advocates, putting things in, like Stephanie suggested, in colors or some kind of organizational system so that everybody can follow it, and look for those common routines that you can start with, like the dinner and what has to go out on the plates, and go with those things. So with that idea, meaning everybody in school has to write down their assignments for the day. So all the kids will be doing that. And so work on a way that they can all do that, and maybe put a social story or a visual cue together so that they can all follow those same rules and model it for each other.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Patty. Is there any other panelists that would like to respond to this question?
Well, I was going to throw something out, and this is just a tool that specifically could work for this person who has a very challenging situation. But like, I've found for some students that it's really helpful to have them have a chance to reflect on their day, like how did they do, what went well, what didn't go well, so you can troubleshoot for the next day, if there's a problem with their routine. And they're able to reflect, how did they do with paying attention? How did they do, what went wrong, what went right? And then, again, problem solving those things for the next day so you can keep a smooth system running as much as possible.
Thank you, Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Debbie. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm kind of an organizational guru when it comes to this, and I've had 4 children. So one of the things that I've always found helpful is to pull up an Excel spreadsheet and on one column list all the times, and have a column for each child, and type in there what their classes are and what time they're having it, and try to keep track of that routine. Because then you've got one sheeter that you can see what every child is doing and when. It's just a great organizational tool.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I certainly hope that the person who posed that question has found something that will work in the many, many options that were just presented. So thank you. Okay, next question is, what other things can you do when you have set routines and you've made expectations clear, and yet your child at times still feels frustrated, gets loud and verbal? I'm just looking to see who maybe we haven't heard of for a while. Angela, Sally, either of you want to weigh in on that, or anybody else?
I sometimes get frustrated in general too, especially now. I think that there are those days, and we can acknowledge with our children that, like, you're having a rough day, you're having a rough moment. I have rough days too. Let's try breathing, let's try stretching, let's try something together. This might help me, but part of that is being human, not just being a child with a disability.
Right. Also, you can just, if you have those routines, just kind of remind them of them, and ask them, if they're able to verbalize it, why they're, feeling this frustration, because then you could eliminate something, you know, or if you're noticing that if they're not very verbal, well, how about we just, like, I think there was another example, the same one previously, you know, let's just do 5 minutes of this instead of, you know, the whole half hour, and kind of drop the demands a little bit, because this is obviously not going to be a good day. So don't try to make them do, you know, the whole half hour when you can see they're not going to be able to do that. And then you get frustrated and your child's frustrated and feels very unsuccessful. So I think that would be another thing you could try to do.
And I would also add that it's important that as the parent, you try to keep your own level head. It's easy when you see your child being frustrated to match that frustration level. I know sometimes I get very upset and frustrated when my child's not participating or doing what he's supposed to do, and it's really easy to match their frustration level. So it's important that you play out scenarios ahead of time of what you're going to do if your child gets frustrated like that, so that you can tell them, you know, hey, we're going to go sit back in our chair and we're going to sit for 5 more minutes, or we're going to do that type of thing, so that you can have a level head and be an even keel for them.
I would add to that too, that when we reach a certain level of frustration, we're really not able to take in learning or be able to focus on doing a homework problem or something like that. So having that expectation in that moment is going to frustrate both of you. So it's good to take a step back when that occurs to that extent.
Thank you all. Okay, here's another one. All of these tools seem overwhelming. How do you tackle all of this, especially when working with teens? I'm just going to leave that open to whoever would like to respond. How are you all managing? Like you're talking about such wonderful tools. You're talking about visual supports. You're talking about breaks. You're talking about reinforcement, checklists, Excel sheet. You're talking about so many wonderful tools. In your guys' experience with your students, or your children, how did you start? How do you start doing something that's manageable with all those tools?
I think the first step is learning about them, you know, because I was never a parent that was really super organized. So when I would listen to these, mostly they were Michigan Alliance webinars or they were workshops then in person. You know, I would always try to attend those because I always learned a lot. And I might not do everything the way it was presented, you know, but at least I had the idea of what I was supposed to do. And another thing is, I think you shouldn't, as a parent, beat yourself up because you aren't super organized. You know, just take a few things. Don't try to change your world overnight, because it isn't going to happen and you're just going to feel like a failure. So when you do learn something, like during this panel discussion, or if you've watched the 3 webinars previous to this, just take things away that are manageable for you as a family, because every family has their own rhythm, and you know it best of all. And if you could just take a couple things away, that helps your child, even teenagers. You know, you're at least you're going in the right direction, and you don't have to be feeling like you're a failure because you can't do them all.
Excellent, Sally.
I'd like to piggyback on that. Sally, I heard this through Stephanie Grant, Dr. Stephanie Grant, who has come to Oakland Schools a few times to talk with us. And one of the things, she's a parent. She's a trauma practitioner and a clinical psychologist, but she also is a parent of, I think, 6 kids now, several who have IEPs, and I think are also foster kids. She's fabulous. And one of the things that she does she decides during the day that she does not want to cook dinner and she does not want to do dishes. She's exhausted. And so what she does is she keeps that up. That's her goal, not to do dishes, not to have to cook dinner. And so she's going to go out to eat. And with that number of kids, it's going to be, you know, chaotic. She can handle the chaos as long as she doesn't have to do the dishes and cook dinner. So keep your eye on the prize. And sometimes it allows you to deal with the tantrums and the naysaying and the refusing. And, you know, sometimes it is about getting through the day for you. But keep with teenagers, keep the dinner time thing a routine that you do every day, whether they want to or not, without their phones. Sometimes that's the only time that you have them, you know, for the conversations and whatnot. That might also help.
Thank you, Mary.
Can I add just one more thing before we move on, Stephanie? I think key is making sure that you don't try too many things at once. I was trying to think through in the school what we, you know, perhaps we have a lot of ideas that might work. One thing that is really important is that you don't try too many things at once, because you don't want to have to keep up everything if only one thing is working. So pick something and start there and try it for a while. And if it doesn't work, you know, decide if you're going to move on to something else or if you're going to give it a little bit longer. The other thing with teenagers, if you have a child who's able to participate in conversation and decision making with you, maybe say, you know, we're going to try one of these three things. Which one do you want to try first? And let them kind of choose and drive the direction that you're heading. It isn't always going to work, especially with teenagers, but giving them a little bit of control might help you head in the right direction.
Thank you, Kelsey. I love the idea of choosing one thing and sticking for a while. I had a colleague who worked with a child who there was a visual schedule used, and the child did not engage with it. And it turns out it wasn't the right font. So they didn't abandon it. They kept trying, and then they discovered that the font mattered. Okay, the next question, thank you all. The next question is, this is very close to the last question, but maybe just even a little more narrow. This is a lot of information for parents. What would your top 3 universal strategies for parents to focus on be for virtual learning and to set family members up for success, with the goal of maintaining relationships over academics? So top 3 universal strategies. So maybe if people can think of even their top 1, and then we'll get 3, however you want to tackle that.
I would just say some type of schedule, you know, something visual, written, some type of schedule so that your routine can be somewhat predictable.
Good one. Really powerful one.
This is for online learning, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say really assessing your skills of where you're at with technology and what you have available, and really having a good understanding about how to move forward with that.
Great.
I would say building in positive reinforcers throughout your student's day, because we all work harder and want to do more when we're feeling good about what we're doing and we're feeling like we're doing things well or right.
Yeah, that's a really important one.
I really loved in the webinar when you were establishing family expectations and sitting down as a family and choosing those core values and what they look like, and having that ground rule conversation of what it looks like to respect each other and whatever those values were. I thought that was such a valuable tool for our households that carries over to life and to learning. And I think that's one of the things that's hard to balance at this point with the virtual everything in the house.
Very good point. All right, there's more questions, so I can keep on going. What are 3 important questions to ask during an IEP meeting, especially now?
I like the question that Sandy always brings up in our workshops. And she always says, what does that look like for my child? Because it makes everybody think, oh, okay, we have all these great ideas, but how is that going to work for this kid? So I always loved that one. And it's the one I remembered the most. So I'd pass that one along.
Excellent.
I would say, how are we going to communicate with our plan if we need to change something, add something, or all be on the same page? A communication plan.
Critical. That's a good one. Anybody else? Okay.
I was just going to say that I guess my top 3 would probably be, what is my child's present level of academic achievement and functional performance? So where is my child right now with skills and what my child knows? And then what are his or her needs? What are those needs? And then my third question would be, where are we at with progress? Are we making progress towards those goals? And if we're not, then maybe it's time to have a conversation about revising those.
Excellent. Sounds like an IEP process. Very good.
I'd also like to add, because this is about behavior, an important question to ask is, do we need to renew the behavior intervention plan? Are there strategies that are working, not working? And how are we going to, set up that progress monitoring for that? And how often are we going to meet? And who's my point person, like others have brought up?
Excellent. Okay, let me check the time. Do we have time for one more? Or Kanika, I'm looking to you. Let's see.
I think we're going to have to move on, unfortunately, because we do want to share out a couple more resources.
Perfect.
And again, if we did not get to the questions, we will be emailing out that Q&A. So don't worry, we will address your question. Okay. Steph or Stacy, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Just on the toward the end here, we just put out some resources to touch on, and the positive behavioral interventions and supports is a really nice website, and it's got some family resources that are really, really useful. All of these resources will be included in what we send after the webinar, or this webinar, just so you know that. But this is one of them, along with the PBIS organization, or the Association of Positive Behavior Supports. And then the link is on here too. But lots of information on setting up PBIS, some of these protocols and procedures in your home, helping with visuals, the checklist, and those kinds of things. So these are really worth looking at, and they're written for families. And of course, the Michigan Alliance for Families website is full of information. So, and there is a page on PBIS, and I believe you mentioned that before, Kanika, but just a lot of information to be gleaned from their website. And then I did reference here the Michigan MTSS website too. And then the webinars that we held previously, and then the links to the YouTubes. So videos on each. And MTSS here too. And again, this is the website. And then the Michigan Department of Education website, and they have a lot of COVID-19 resources out there that may be really useful. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And again, it references MTSS from the MDE site too. So did you want to wrap up then, Kanika?
Sure, wonderful. Again, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I want to thank all of the panelists. You shared some really valuable information with everyone. I do just want to remind you all that we will be sharing out those resources and the Q&A following this panel. If you have specific questions, again, about your child, your specific child or your child's school, please contact Michigan Alliance for Families at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org. As Stacy just mentioned, we have a PBIS webpage. We also have a COVID-19 webpage where we share updated state and federal guidance regarding COVID-19 and educating students with disabilities. There are also a number of videos and webinars on our website related to COVID-19 and educating students, as well as other topics such as understanding the IEP and transitioning to high school and beyond, just a wealth of a lot of different information. So please check that out. You can find your specific parent mentors contact information on our webpage under the About tab.
And
And
Kanika, I did want to reiterate that this is being recorded and would be available also. We'll be sending that information out.
thank you, Stacy, for that reminder. If we want to go to the next slide.
Yep.
So as we mentioned at the top of the panel discussion, we have an evaluation which we will be sending out to you. Please, your feedback is so valuable. And in order for us to continue to provide free services to families, we really need that feedback. So if you could just take a few moments to fill out that evaluation, that would be great. And next slide, I think it's just a slide of resources that we'll be sharing out.
Yeah. That's it.
All right, so thank you all so much. Please check your email for the survey or the evaluation and the additional resources and any answers to questions that received that we did not get time to answer live. Thank you, Stacy and Stephanie, so much for your hard work. Thank you to all of our ISD partners who joined us, and thank you to our Michigan Alliance for Families, parent mentors and parents. We really value you and appreciate the hard work that you do. So have a good night, everyone.